Well, despite the disappointment UCLA has been to many college football observers across the nation this season who expected a run to the college football playoff, this team is still in control of its destiny in the Pac-12 and could march on to a Pac-12 championship game, and then who knows from there if they finish the season with 2 losses. We bring in Mike WR. He writes for Gojo Bruin. It's a tremendous website on UCLA athletics, specifically this time of year. Yes, basketball is coming very soon, but let's focus on football as the Bruins at 4-2 in the Pac-12, 7-2 overall, take a trip to Seattle for their last road trip within Pac-12 play. And so we bring in Mike to talk about the Bruins. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How you doing? Thank you for having me on again.
Doing well, doing well. So we observed that UCLA effort at the Rose Bowl against an Arizona team that was red hot at that point, and this defense is a bit of a mystery right now because against 2 pretty inferior foes in Colorado and Cal, they give up 34 and 37 points, and then they turn it around at the Rose Bowl, and after that first possession, lights out effort against the Wildcats.
Yeah, it's the big head scratcher with, well, amongst many things with UCLA football is how their defense is inconsistent, and they have really great times, and then they have really bad times. We saw a really good time, but at the same time, we've also seen a bit of the best I could describe is that the team is finally coming together, and especially against the high-powered Arizona offense, the nickel package, which defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich likes to use, seemed to match up, if anything. And not only that, they shut Arizona down. Arizona was, I should have the stats. I'm sorry about this, but they held Arizona to one of their lowest yardage totals. Their UCLA made some dumb mistakes, and we're going to get into penalties, but basically the only time Arizona scored was off of 2 really bad penalties.
You bring up the penalties, Mike, and that's something that I was not aware of. So I'm watching the UCLA-Arizona game. I watched it gun to gun, and of course Jim Moore has done an outstanding job with UCLA, bringing them from a marginal program, and we've seen the ascension, and I think we'll continue to see it as the recruiting efforts come to fruition. But I had no idea that under Jim Mora that UCLA was the most penalized program in FBS football.
Oh yeah, it's a stat we try to bury.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and you saw it if you did see the Arizona game, you saw that the first half was just ridiculous to say the least. The penalties, whether they're, a lot of talk is maybe there's a conspiracy with the Pac-12 refs, but that's a different story. The fact that UCLA still has this many penalties is making this many dumb mistakes, and you could see in Arizona's first drive was the first drive of the game. UCLA had stopped them twice on 3rd down, but both of those Arizona got to continue because of 2 dumb Myles Jack penalties. One where it was unsportsmanlike conduct, and the second was a face mask. And then a few plays later, Arizona scores. Now, the good thing is that was the only score that they did have, and a lot of the penalties were on the offensive side, holding, just ridiculous calls that should be reeled in at this point. But it was good to see that they turned it around, but still 11 penalties for over 100 yards in a game is, as you said, head-scratching. You just throw up your hands and go, I have no idea what's happening now. But the second half, they did come around. Maybe I think it was 1 or 2 penalties that they had in the second half, and it was just all focus. It was all concentration, and Arizona was shut out for, 56.5 minutes of this game? Do I have that? Yeah. And at halftime, I thought, well, at least they're still in it. At least Arizona hasn't done anything offensively. And in the third quarter, you just saw, wow, this defense is fantastic. It's finally coming together.
Let's talk about the offense now, because maybe you've partially explained why the Bruins only scored 17 points, and that in a Pac-12 game is mind-numbing up into itself, just because of the scores that we see in the Pac-12. So just your assessment across the board. We know what Brett Hundley gives us at quarterback, probably a top 5 to quarterback in the country. Paul Perkins just exceeded 1,000 yards on the season, and your wide receiver play. So coming down the stretch, looking to get to a Pac-12 championship game, your thoughts about the offensive play thus far?
It's very puzzling to see how everything is very inconsistent. Like the defense, they have their highs and they have their lows. Brett Hundley still seems to be hesitant on making a quick pass, and I agree with that because he's had some horrible interceptions this year. So taking his time with that, I don't mind, but just having that much time in the pocket, and before I go on, I just want to credit the O-line, which has been phenomenal and has really improved their gameplay. They've allowed Perkins, as you said, to get 1,000 yards this season. Hundley has all the time in the world, but when it comes to Hundley, it just seems he's not as sharp. And a lot of people have said that maybe he's regressed, but I don't think it's that. I think he's maybe not plateaued, but he just hasn't gone to where he needed to be, or even better, he hasn't gone to where Bruin fans' expectations have wanted him to be. But even still, he does have those fabulous legs, which are getting him yards every single game. He had the most rushing yards this season. Several times he saved UCLA, running for first downs on third and long. So you can see the athletic specimen. His legs are working. His arm is not as good as it should be. Going back to Perkins in the running game, as I said, Hundley's running a ton of yards. Perkins is finding holes up and down the O-line. The O-line, you just have to give him credit. Ever since they switched Malcolm Bunch from tackle to guard and put Connor McDermott on the tackle spot, things have been clicking a lot more. So that's one good thing that you should see on the left side of the line. But the running backs are getting really good help from that. Especially watch out for freshman Nate Starks. Not only can this guy, run, but he can also smash some people. There were a couple of times, I think it was in the Cal game, where he ran into the Cal defender and pushed them back. So he's going to be something to see in the future. And as for the wide receivers, because Hundley is stalling a little bit, they're not getting as much play, but it's still good. UCLA is most effective when they pass the ball around. When they get up to 8, 9, 10 receivers in the game, that's when they're most effective. It keeps the defense on their toes and keeps UCLA fresh. Although with answering the question of why UCLA has kind of stalled a bit, you also kind of have to look towards offensive coordinator Noel Mazzoni. There was that really good 70-yard touchdown play from Hundley to Jordan Payton, which was just beautiful. Beautiful execution, perfect time to call it. But then there are other times where I think there was a drive, there was a play where he was 3rd and 5, and he tried to run a read play, and that got stuffed, and UCLA had to punt. So it doesn't seem that there's much creativity consistently. And for me, it'd be great to open up the playbook, because a lot of the plays, especially the running plays up the middle, are very predictable. So I'm not down on Mazzoni, because when he's on fire, it's hard to stop him and his offense. But at other times, UCLA goes 3 and out, and it's like, what was that? What did they just waste that for? So it's good to see that they were okay and that they didn't lose the game. Hundley had a fumble, but overall they did all right. But scoring 17 points, it's very low for this UCLA high-powered offense.
It's one of those years, Mike, in the Pac-12 where outside of Oregon, we're seeing no blowouts. Nobody's a light touch in the Pac-12.
Exactly,
Even going to Colorado, overtime game. Going to Cal, a 2-point game. So going to Seattle, UCLA, I would think most people would believe to be the better team. But this is no gimme in any sense of the word, with Washington coming in at 6-3. So your thoughts about what do you know about the Huskies at this point?
Well, first off, that stadium is beautiful. Never been inside it. I've been to Seattle. I was in Seattle a few years ago. Saw it. It's a massive stadium. It looks beautiful on the lake. Apparently, it's just incredibly loud. So it's definitely the 12th man. UCLA, no matter what, is going to have a hard time, because these Huskies and Chris Peterson, who's in his first year as the Washington head coach, is looking for a statement win. They got wrecked by Oregon a few weeks ago. They had a pretty decent game where they were in it with Stanford, and they're still looking for their identity. Their offense is not doing that great. They actually had to convert linebacker Shaq Thompson from defense to offense, and he's been the lead running backer, and just he's a big Myles Jack like specimen who's busting through lines and getting a massive amount of yards. But the offense is, I think UCLA's defense, especially if it comes alive like it did this past game, is going to shut them down. Now the defense is a different story. As I said, Shaq Thompson is a converted linebacker, is playing running back right now because of injuries to the running game of Washington, and they just have so many great guys on defense that they can kind of afford to have Thompson play on the offense. But they have great linebackers. They have a couple of good cornerbacks, and the one that I want to see is Huali Kikaha. I think he was nominated. He was one of the semifinalists for the Butkus Award for top linebacker in the nation. They're gonna do everything to stop UCLA, and I'm sure that they've seen a lot of tape, especially of this last game, to see how to stop UCLA, to figure out when they're gonna do the big play, when they're gonna run it up the middle again, and if UCLA can open up the playbook a little more and really keep the Washington defense guessing, I think they'll have no problem. But at the same time, the defense is awesome. If by chance Shaq Thompson plays on the linebacking crew, they're going to give UCLA a tough time. Thompson has 3 forced fumbles, one that went 100 yards in the game against Cal. They have some talent up there. They just need to bring it in, bring it all together. So.
Yeah, Shaq Thompson is the less heralded of the Myles Jack class, and it'll be interesting to see them on the field possibly at the same time. Of course, UCLA is determined to focus Jack as a linebacker, which is the wise decision. They've got a 1,000-yard running back, and Myles Jack being one of the best linebackers in the country, but still getting some carries. Got 6 against Arizona, while Shaq Thompson, as you mentioned, a guy that can be just a menace as a linebacker, actually has 4 defensive touchdowns, but is so good on offense, and the need is so much more on that side of the football that they've had to concentrate him on the offensive side of the ball, and he gained 100 yards against Arizona State, 174 against Colorado. So we have 2 very similar football players that are just so good you can plug them in anywhere and they will succeed. But we may, hopefully, locking in on this one from start to finish, get a few scenarios where we see Myles Jack and also Shaq Thompson going at each other at the same time on the same play. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, exactly. Actually wrote an article for Gojo Bruin about that. That would be interesting to see Myles Jack on offense going against Thompson on defense, and vice versa. But the reality is, Jack is going to come in on short yardage when he's needed. Thompson is most likely going to play a lot more running back than he will linebacker. So, it'd be great to see this Iron Man battle, and I think we will see it a couple times, but it's not going to happen the whole time because both teams have some weapons. UCLA a little bit more than Washington, in my opinion, but it's going to be a battle from start to finish, no matter who's going at each other at what point. UCLA has to stick to their game, be a little bit more creative, and keep the defense the way it is, because right now it's really working for them.
We're joined by Mike W.R. on Gojo Bruin. I would suggest anybody who loves college football, not just the Pac-12 or UCLA, but there's some tremendous stuff on there from Mike and the rest of the writing staff there at Gojo Bruin to check it out. That's where I keep up definitely with some UCLA football. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight and information into some UCLA football with another important one for the Bruins as they try to march on to a Pac-12 South title.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.